What if I told you that a simple room could hold a mystery so deep, it could send shivers down your spine? Nestled in the heart of Belfast, there lies a student residence known as Allenbrook Hall. Part of the larger Queen's Elms village, this hall of residence, a rather plain 1960s era building, bustling with the lively chatter of students, the rustling of textbooks, and the usual humdrum of university life. Among its many rooms, one was particularly notorious, room 611. This room, on the 6th floor, held a secret that would unnerve even the bravest souls. It was the autumn of 1981 when Ken, a microbiology student, moved into room 611 with his roommate James. The room was like any other. 2 beds, a couple of desks, and a window overlooking the bustling city. However, as the autumn leaves began to fall and the nights grew longer, the room revealed its eerie nature. On their first night in the room, a Thursday, Ken, lying in his bed, saw something that chilled him to the bone. As he explains,
James, my roommate, and I turned in for the night. I was laying awake in my bed, eyes wide open. Suddenly, a startling sight caught my attention, a large, ominous black silhouette near my desk. It appeared to be a man, but its darkness was like anything I'd ever seen, an abyss of black. At that very moment, 2 distinct sensations overwhelmed me. Firstly, a deafening white noise filled my ears. Secondly, an intense, palpable aura of malevolence emanated from this figure, like a tangible force of pure evil. It felt as though all hope and goodness had been eradicated, leaving only despair in their wake. This despair washed over me in waves, so powerful that I could see the blankets on my bed rippling in response. The entity seemed to harbour a personal vendetta against me, intent on causing me harm. Terrified in what I watched as it began to glide towards me. When it reached my shoulder, my instincts took over. Fueled by a rush of adrenaline, I lunged at the figure. To my astonishment, as soon as I made my move, the figure and all the dread it brought vanished into thin air. The room was just eerily silent. It was nothing. I just couldn't work out what had just happened. And I said to my roommate James, the strangest thing has just happened to me. And to my surprise, James said that he too had experienced something bizarre. And I half expected him to recount a similar experience to mine, but his story was completely different. He described how while he was trying to fall asleep with his eyes closed, he noticed a small point of light. And this speck of light gradually expanded in his mind's eye and eventually revealing the back of a man's head. Then unexpectedly the man turned around, gave him a really unsettling, hostile look before vanishing just as quickly as he had appeared.
the next night another terrifying event took place.
The next day was a Friday. I remember because it was the weekend and most people, other students, had gone home for what we used to call the laundry. Well, I think I'd back to your parents. And I stayed in my dorm that night, albeit with a sense of apprehension after what happened the following evening. And as the evening wore on, I found myself alone on the entire floor, engrossed in a book. It was, I don't know, between 9:30 and 10 o'clock at night. And my room's lights were on, casting a nice warm sort of glow, and suddenly I heard the elevator, and it stopped, its doors opening, and I was puzzling if someone had come back or was visiting me. At that moment I experienced the same ominous sense of evil, and this time it was emanating on my left, which is the direction of the elevator. Then came the sound of really heavy footsteps, sort of reminiscent of boots with nails in the soles, thundering down the hallway towards my room. The steps just halted right outside my door, and I don't know, it was like a second or so of almost the most tangible silence, and then abruptly the door began to shake violently, as if it was being simultaneously kicked and pounded at the top and the bottom. The force was so severe that I feared the door might, come off its hinges. Again, acting on instinct, I leapt from my bed, grasped the door handle. I could actually feel it trembling under my hand. And then I yanked the door open to find nothing. And the sinister presence had vanished again, leaving behind just quiet. And the elevator was still on my floor, confirming I hadn't imagined its arrival, yet the corridor was completely deserted. There was no lights in any rooms and no sign of anyone. The floor was completely empty.
Fear began to creep into the hearts of those who lived there. The initial reactions of disbelief gradually gave way to a gnawing sense of dread. Something was amiss in room 611, something that couldn't be explained. Little did they know this was just the beginning of a chilling saga. Curious and disturbed, Ken and James began to inquire about the history of the room.
And on the same floor as us, there were two guys who had previously stayed in room 611. And one evening, I think it was the Monday, I walked past the kitchen and noticed these two along with a couple of other guys. So I approached and I said to them, "Has anything strange ever happened in that room while you stayed in it?" And their exchange of glances was telling. It was clear they had experienced something we hadn't. So prodding further, I asked about their experiences, and they recounted incidents of books flying across the room and striking the opposite wall with sort of notable force.
And after the academic year had finished, Ken and James left the room. They then returned to Allenbrook Hall the following term to continue their studies, albeit thankfully in a different room. Two new first-year students then moved into room 611, unaware of the room's history.
Yeah, so the next academic year, those of us who had been on the floors the previous year made a collective decision to keep silent about the known sort of oddities of room 611, and we essentially chose to withhold the information from the new occupants, basically repeating what our predecessors had done to us. That my reasoning for this was somewhat experimental. I wanted to observe what would happen with these new guys who were unaware of the room's history.
It wasn't long before the new students approached Ken one day.
After a couple of months, these two guys approached me in the kitchen about they asked me about the room, and they seemed troubled and asked if there was something amiss with it, and I was curious about their experience, so I asked them to share them with me. They began by describing how they both started having nightmares, which was unusual for them. And these nightmares were not only frequent but intensely disturbing, often waking them up. But what was odd, their nightmares sort of synchronized into the same dream simultaneously for both of them, which they found very unnerving. And then it sort of escalated even worse than that, in fact, because one would have a nightmare that the other would then continue in their sleep later that night. And they would wake up and realise that their separate nightmares were part of a single coherent story. But it didn't end there. The room's disturbances evolved into what they can describe as poltergeist-like activity, particularly with cutlery. Knives and forks would fly across the room, and sharp objects were found arranged besides their beds in potentially sort of harmful setups. And this led them to believe that the occurrences were not just strange but malicious. So as a result, they spent as little time in the room as possible, understandably disturbed by the events.
Curious and disturbed, Ken and James began to inquire about the history of room 611. They talked the cleaning lady who worked in Allenbrook Hall.
Yeah, so by this time we were actually quite friendly with the cleaning lady, and we asked her if she had noticed anything peculiar about Alan And her response sort of indicated that she had been anticipating our inquiry, and she did confess to feeling uneasy when she was in our room cleaning it, and always sort of sensing an unexplained presence. And she mentioned this feeling had persisted for years. So we asked her for more details, and she then told us some tragic events that were connected to our room. First, she recounted an incident where someone had fallen from the room's window. An event I think was officially dangerous suicide. However, there were sort of whispers of the individual might have been pushed. She then mentioned another student who had occupied the room, and this student was tragically shot and killed either on the way to returning from Mass, and I think that incident took place back in the early 1970s. And thirdly, she said that a third student had also died while in the room. And her view was that these three unfortunate individuals, all of whom met their end while living in room 611, were potential sources for the eerie disturbances that we'd been experiencing.
But what haunted room 611? Who or what was behind these eerie occurrences? Some paranormal experts and skeptics suggested the haunting was the result of residual energy from a past traumatic event. They pointed to the hall's history, filled with stories of heartache and despair. Others, more scientifically inclined, proposed electromagnetic fields or infrasound as the cause, natural phenomena that can induce feelings of unease or fear. Allenbrook Hall eventually met its demise, being demolished in 2004. The stories of room 611 lived on, whispered among students and paranormal enthusiasts alike. It became a legend, a chilling tale of the unseen and unexplained, forever etched in the annals of Belfast's mysterious history.
Like and subscribe. Till next time!